weird kid in your school do that you'll never forget? Story 1 hit the school bully over the head with a mini baseball bat and split his head wide open. The school bully was absolutely brutal, but I winced seeing it. Weird kid was charged with aggravated battery and expelled from school. He ended up becoming a very successful diesel mechanic. He wasn't weird at all, but didn't fit into what the school and suburb considered to be normal. Story 2 climbed into the first floor lab through the window as chemistry lesson was in progress, posed dramatically at the door, announced "Join me" in the corridors of time, and left. Story 3, hey, I've got one from the perspective of a teacher, and it's pretty wholesome. I had one of the weird kids a few years back. The kid was sent to the principal office for the wackiest, like putting chewing gum in other people's hair, but also his own hair, etc. Didn't have a lot of friends. Anyway, also had a special need girl in that class. She was older than every other kid, and an adult helper was there to help her write down the class and explain things to her when needed. Anyway, the girl farted. It just went off, and she looked up, and I could see in her eyes she was panicking. Being the special need girl is always hard, but to be the special need girl who farted in a class full 12 years old was even worse now. To the credit of my students, they wouldn't have mocked her outwardly, and they were pretty understanding of this girl's situation. But before realizing that it was her, they would have made comments and asked who had farted. Already, I could see a few kids looking up from their papers and all. They all had the look of who farted, and some were already laughing. But then, out of nowhere, the weird knight in golden armor looked up from his test, grinning ear to ear, and ripped the nastiest I've ever heard. He was a kid, but this thing sounded like the scream of a dying animal. Like I'm almost 30, and I don't do sounds like that. Plus, he moaned the most obscene sound, maybe ever. It sounded like uwu years before uwu was even a thing. The entire class was either disgusted or dying with laughter. Weird Kid said he was sorry, then went off a second time with a pained look on his face. I had caught up to what he had done and why he had done it. I yelled at him just enough to be believable, asked him to go to the bathroom if he needed to, and asked him to stay at the end of the class. The entire class knew he had done up. They all went back to their test, and the Weird Kid acted like nothing had happened. At the end of class, everyone left, but I told the Weird Kid to wait at the door. The girl's helper came to me and was like, "Okay, quick heads up. I think he did it on purpose to help the girl." And I was like, "Yeah, I think so too, but let him say that because maybe it wasn't it." I was 99 sure it was what he had done, but anyway, I let him back in and asked him why he had done that. I also told him I thought I knew, and he admitted that yes, he had done it to cover for the girl because he didn't want her to feel bad about it, and that way people laughed at him, but that because he was always doing things people laughed at, it was okay. I told him it was a cool thing to do. He agreed and went on with his day like it was nothing. God hero, edit typo. Hit here, why brain, why? Story 4, he had a tooth he was able to easily remove and put back in for some reason and would do it for a quarter. Surprisingly, I think he actually made quite a bit of money doing it because I constantly saw people paying him so good on him, I guess. Story 5 mouthed off to the teacher who got so angry he stormed down the aisle, grabbed the kid's desk, and slid it with the kid still sitting in it all the way to the back of the class, and made him sit there for weeks later. Same kid had a big brother who caught a fly in the library and popped in his mouth and swallowed it whole. We later heard after high school that the kid was goofing around with a gun and accidentally shot his big brother. Story 6 in my school in Scotland. There was a guy called Willie. If you shouted, "Willie, give us a wiggle," he would tuck his arms in like a T-Rex and shake his hips back and forth. That image has never left me to this day, aka Willie Wiggle. Story 7, he was a rancher's kid, and he showed up on the high school campus in a front loader filled with bagels. Literally hundreds of bagels, and poured them out on the central terrace. 6-foot-high pile of bagels. He parked the thing back in the lot, walked back to his pile of bagels, and just started chucking bagels at people. Started a bagel fight that was legendary. Story 8, dude brought a waffle maker to school, and during PE, he stayed hidden in the dressing room until they locked it, and then he chilled there and made some waffles for himself until the class ended and the dressing rooms were unlocked again. The smell of waffles was nice, though. Story 9. There was a girl in high school who would hiss at people and carry around a stuffed pumpkin. She told me that I was fun to bully because I was too nice and wouldn't do anything about it. New low when you get bullied by the weird kid. Story 10 turned out to not be who she said she was. She acted very standoffish. Turned out she was actually a 31-year-old adult woman suffering mental health issues. Story 11 for context. Someone threw a banana peel across the classroom. It just so happened to land next to the weird kid. The teacher very stupidly thought it was the weird kid, like how is it them? It flew across the room and landed beside them. Anyway, the kid proceeded to lose his after being accused, opened the window, and tried jumping out of it. It was on the 3rd floor, I wasn't there for it, but apparently he backed out or something, and so it became the famous story of a year group. Everyone knew about it. Story 12 emptied a fire extinguisher all over the auditorium stage. attacked teachers with a yardstick, screaming and fighting the Mooney Man, emotionally scarred every girl he ever dated by threatening suicide on a near-weekly basis, plucked his hair out to the point of having to wear a hat for a semester, and then kept it all in a baggie, developed a cocaine habit. And in every single example, his father would bail him out, and he would receive next to zero punishment. Story 13, somehow accessed on the school computer, threatened to essay a girl. She was passing a note to a friend in class about it. The teacher grabbed it, and when the teacher read it, you just saw the horror on her face. Story 14, I was the weird kid. Did nothing in particular, but looking back, I was dealing with a shitty home life, which definitely affected the way I was at school. Story 15, third grade. She was a new kid who always came to school smelling like pee. One day at recess, she told me her father stuck his thing in her at night. I never told a soul, and I'm unable to forget it. She was gone the next year. Poor kid, I wonder where she ended up. Story 16, I was the weird kid TBH. I used to lie like Jay Cartwright in primary school. I think at one point I said my uncle owned Xbox, and that I had a golden Xbox 720 that isn't coming out until next year, among many other stupid and insignificant lies. Everyone probably thought I was but luckily I've managed to channel that into writing fiction stories as an adult. Story 17, the weird kid was me. In high school, we had a teacher who had a creative solution to disruptive behavior. When a student needed to be removed from the room, Head used that opportunity to give a pop quiz, 10 extra credit points, couldn't be made up. And the questions were silly, trivial things like what day of the week is it, or what color shirt am I wearing. The idea was to make the troublesome student miss out on easy points while they stood out in the hall. Clever idea. Cool teacher. But $5 is $5, so at the end of the semester when someone wanted their B to become an A, I would act out enough to trigger a quiz and then collect after class. It didn't happen often enough for him to catch on, that I know of, but at least 3 times throughout the year. The most disruptive was when, shortly before he entered the room before class, I contorted myself to hide on the lower shelf of a rolling equipment cart near his desk. He didn't notice until he was taking roll and got to my name. The rest of the class couldn't hold in their giggles. He turned and saw me and let out the heaviest sigh. We don't pay teachers enough. Story 18, I was sitting in a circle with my friends during a break, just chatting. Weird kid comes and sits with us, super unusual. But we started to talk with him too. I don't even know how the topic was brought up, but he drops the bombshell that his parents are pedophiles. He ran it on for a few minutes, stood up, and said I could see myself growing up to be like them. Then Naruto ran away. Story 19, I was one of the weird kids. Got picked on mercilessly from 2nd to 6th grade for being quiet and timid. Then one day at recess, I snapped and grabbed one bully by the shoulders and bounced his head off the concrete wall behind him. Then I got picked on for having anger management issues until I went to a different high school than all of them. Story 20, dude caught a live wolf spider behind a cabinet in class. Turns on a hot glue gun and proceeds to shove the hot glue gun between his fingers to cover the spider and his hand with hot glue. Ended up with 1st and 2nd degree burns. Same dude launched bottle rockets out of his. More 2nd degree burns on his this time. Also heated up a penny in chemistry class and branded himself with it. I'm just now realizing this kid liked burning himself. Story 21, he asked another kid to lay his hand on the table, and then he took a pencil and pierced the other kid's hand with it. I think we were around 7 years old at the time. Story 22, during lunchtime, he and his friends jumped the fence to the automotives area of the school, found a blowtorch or some kind of lighter, and lit it above the opening of a fuel drum. Then it exploded. After being knocked out, his friends ran, and then the school went into lockdown, and he was flown by helicopter to a hospital 4 hours away. He came back to school a few weeks later with half his hair gone, no eyebrows, and a slightly scarred face. After being the most popular kid at school, it quickly ended when he started screaming the N-word and other slurs at the Aboriginal student. Not smart considering about 70 of the school was Aboriginal, and the town was 60 Aboriginal. This happened in Victoria, Australia in late October 2022. You can Google fuel drum explosion 7 News. Story 23, put a slice of bologna in the teacher's CD player and press play. Nothing happened, but it was hilarious when the teacher went to put in a CD and was like, WTF. Story 24, I'll use the term weird kid loosely here, because the weird kid turned into someone with schizophrenia who ruined my last academic years. He made all sorts of accusations against me. This was a time when the internet was just coming into schools, etc. Literally every single pupil turned against me. And for 2 years, I was truly alone. I was banned from all computer access and grounded for most of this time. Not that I want to leave, I was arrested twice and interviewed by police, and my parents found out I'd been self-harming during this, and they went ballistic at me. Just after failing my exams, all charges were dropped, and he admitted he had done everything himself. No apologies, no support, nothing. I was accused of stabbing him with pins, attempted rape, smashing his house windows, cutting the phone lines, email harassment, bullying, theft, and much more. I'm 39 and still haven't forgiven my parents. My dad was a police officer too, unbelievably. Story 25, more of a quiet guy than a weird guy. But he turns around out of nowhere and says I'm going to fake a seizure. Sitting in the front, just blasts his desk and chair over, starts writhing around on the floor, making crazy noise and knocking stuff over for probably 2 minutes. Just gets up and says, thought I was having a seizure. Teacher was just shocked and just went back to teaching. One of the most out-of-character things I've ever seen anyone do. Dude was like the polar opposite of a troublemaker. It was absolutely hilarious. But this was a pretty rowdy class, and the teacher didn't really have much control over the room. So nutty stuff was happening all the time. Story 26, little skinny kid with glasses who ate worms and liked to make himself choke just to freak people out. Tried out for the football team and made it as a kicker. Story 27, there was this guy in my high school named Mike Tyson. Yes, that was literally his name, and he was high-functioning autistic with an incredible knowledge and obsession with cars and motors. He didn't take from anyone, not even faculty. He acted like the king of the school and would make motor sounds while power walking through the hallways and cut people off. It was hilarious because he was so serious while doing it. Nobody seemed to mind it either. That's just how he was, and we all accepted it. Story 28, poor kid, was tormented all the time by bullies and the cool kids. We were in woodshop one day, and there were 2 bullies of a larger group in the class with me, and this kid, they were talking one day about getting a bunch of pills of some kind, but they couldn't find any. The weird kid spoke up and asked what they were looking for. I don't recall the reply. Something to do with raving. This was the 90s. Weird kid comes in the next day with what they asked for. And as the transaction was made, there seemed to be genuine gratitude, respect coming from the bullies towards this kid for the first time. Of course, one of them threw a fake punch to make the kid flinch anyway, because of course they did. About an hour later, those 2 kids are seen waddling out to the parking lot, crapping themselves the whole way. Weird kid said he put his X-Acto knife to work the previous night, had shaved down a bunch of colon cleanse tablets in a similar appearing pills the bullies were all too happy to pay for and consume for the rest of high school. And oh, one mess with this kid. Story 29, this named Penny crossed over a barrier at the zoo to feed a cougar a peppermint. The cat scratched her, and the zoo decided to euthanize it rather than risk legal ramifications. Seriously, that's stupid. Story 30, smartest kid in school, late 80s. Parents both worked at NASA, and he's currently a prof at Caltech. He was brutally bullied back when it was normalized. The ringleader was a classic 80s bully preppy and drove a beloved BMW 2002, lovingly restored in shiny candle-apple red. Rob the geek got him back good. He took a dead snake feeder rat and put it in a large ball jar with a few inches of hydrogen peroxide and water. He sealed the jar, Slim Jimmed into the dude's car during football practice, and tucked it under the seat. It was still hot fall in CA our senior year, 1987. It didn't take long few days for the chemicals to liquefy and putrefy the rat and build pressure until the jar exploded with great effect in the school parking lot. You could smell the damage from hundreds of yards away, and they actually smelled it from the office, probably 300 yards away, and called the cops. The bully's family professionally steamed the car multiple times before the cleaners admitted it was a lost cause, and the car was totaled. Rob never told a soul until at our 10-year reunion, he confided in me that he did it. Well done, Rob. This would also ruin an entire house. Rob told me. I still can almost taste that horrific smell. Story 31, just a little PSA. Oftentimes extreme, asocial, uncharacteristic behaviors in children are a sign of severe trauma. Not saying 100 of the time, but it is an important red flag to pay attention to. Story 32, weird kid in my school decided he didn't want to go to any classes that day. So instead of just ditching school like a normal kid would do, no, he decided instead to duct tape himself to a rugby post and was there the entire day. Only noticed him still there when I was leaving at the end of the day. Story 33, there was this guy that was, as much as I hate to say it, because it seems a school shooter type, like longer, ratty, dirty hair, always dressed like the Columbine guys, and just said some weird and concerning things sometimes. So at my graduation of 400 people, he was one of the speakers. It was like an audition, and you'll get to speak if you're engaging enough. So he walks up there, and everyone is like, oh, it's this guy. This will be interesting. First thing he says is, everyone put your hands up, and I swear it was dead silent. And everyone froze and was just like, ah, here we go. He goes, I said, put your hands up. Most people did. Then he goes, y'all smell bad. Put your arms down, LOL. Ended up giving a crazy good graduation speech. Story 34. He pooped in his shorts. We wore short pants during elementary, and our teacher approached him saying he needs to change. Then he just went and removed his short pants right there, and they're unmasking the smell. and proceeded to his underwear pooped at this point with bare hands and immediately shoved it in his bag. He then put on a tantrum and cried, saying our teacher is a bad woman for humiliating him in class. Story 35, I was the weird kid in my class. Looking back now, there's lots of weird things I did that don't make any sense. I know my history and trauma, but no one else did. Looking from the outside in, I can only imagine what people thought of me or the things I did. I was bullied from second grade on for being overweight. I look at the pictures of me, though, and I never felt like I looked overweight, and there were kids bigger than myself that no one harassed. I was always singled out, though. Kids I thought were my friends would run away from me at recess. I was constantly getting into fights. I was harassed daily in high school by a group of guys that would wait for me in front of my locker in the mornings, so they could berate me to the point I didn't want to go to school, and no adults cared. This was the same year Columbine happened. They were just as weird and outcast as I was, but I was the guy to take it. My dad was very prominent in the community, and my mom was the head teller at one of two banks in town, so everyone knew her. People thought our family had it all figured out, but in reality, my dad was an alcoholic, and my mom had mental disorders and was physically abusive. When I got my first car, someone from high school kept putting dead animals in it. Happened 3 times. Dad was too drunk to care, and my mom didn't believe me. Kids loved to encourage me to do things that were weird, abnormal, convincing me it was perfectly normal. I did it not knowing any better, and then the large group would laugh at me for it. Long story for the post, but I could list off a ton of things I did that were idiotic, stupid, or just weird. I had a friend, or so I thought, tell me that the way to get the most popular girl in school was to stare at her to show her I liked her. So, at a basketball game, I stared at her for must have been 20 minutes. She was understandably creeped out, and the group of guys kept laughing at me. She told me to F off, and I didn't understand what I did wrong. There was a girl at school that I liked, so I asked her out, and she basically told me not a chance, and so I put a bag of dog treats in her locker. She retaliated with a can of Slim Fast in mine, but I found it when I went to the bathroom during class and threw it away. So when I went to open my locker, there was a group of people watching me to see my reaction, and they were shocked when there was nothing in there. During a school spirit homecoming week in high school, there was a day you painted your face to show your school spirit. So I painted my face like a guy from ICP, but with school colors. I even cringe myself when I think back on that one. I had serious potty training issues in kindergarten and first grade. I would constantly hold my bowls as long as I had to, so I didn't have to go use the restroom, and I would freeze in place when the feeling hit. This sometimes led to me soiling myself. ID later learned that this is a trauma response, and was a way for me to try and control something when I felt like I didn't have control over anything. One day, I was in line for the monkey bars at recess, and when it was my turn, I climbed up the ladder, and then the urge hit, and I froze. I couldn't move, and so a kid pushed me off the ladder. When I hit the ground, I pooped. It made a mess and stained my shorts. Kids either laughed or were disgusted. My mom had to pick me up, and well, let's just say she was very mad that I would do that, and it made her look like a bad mom who couldn't potty train her child. Really, the list could go on and on. The weird stuff only compounded in my town as I got older. Oddly enough, though, I spent most of my time in neighboring town, and I had tons of friends. People respected me, and I had what I know now to be a normal high school experience. One of the most popular kids at my school spent time with me on a school trip to Washington, D.C. my junior year. I had girls interested in me because I was charming. I made friends with several guys from other cities and had a great time. My classmate even remarked that he didn't realize how cool I had gotten. There was always just something about the kids in my hometown and the schools that really messed with me. Knowing what I know now, I wish I could help the kid. I'd tell him that the hurt and pain he was feeling inside, mixed with the loneliness, never fully goes away. But with medication, the depression isn't as bad. I'd tell him that people will always judge you based on what little they know about you. But don't let their opinions of you weigh you down. I'd tell him he's a good kid, that mom needed help she never got, and dad didn't understand how much his drinking affected the family. Most of all, I'd tell him to take the knife away from his wrists and put that bottle of pills back in the cabinet. Death might have felt like the easiest answer to the chaos that was my life, but eventually you'll live a life you love. You'll adopt 2 foster children, and you'll foster many more after that. You'll rescue a boy from a life he didn't deserve, and hell treat your daughter like a man should treat her. But most of all, I'd tell him that he is loved, because in my first 18 years on this earth, I never knew what love was. I knew disappointment, anger, and heartache, but not once did I feel like the world wanted me here. Try as I might, and I tried many times, the universe foiled every attempt I made to end it. There was a reason the universe kept me hanging on. I didn't know it then, but I know now that I am here to be of service. I am here to show children who would otherwise go unloved that they are amazing in their own right, that they will go on to change the world. No child deserves to feel like a burden. No child deserves to feel alone. Story 36, I'm sitting here trying to think of something, and I went to an inner city high school with a ton of kids in the late 1980s. Everyone was a weird psychopath. Story 37, I'm 50 now, but I still remember this incident that happened in middle school. We were at the end of science class doing cleanup on the black wooden tables that each sat two students. All of a sudden, our science teacher, Mrs. Snap, yells out, "Natalia, what are you doing?" Natalia was deaf, one of the weird kids, Coke bottle glasses. Hair looked like she licked electrical outlets for fun. Natalia replies back, "Eating Comet was an abrasive, all-purpose powder cleaner we used to scrub clean back in the 80s. Mrs. Snap asked Natalia, "Why are you eating Comet?" Natalia's response, "Because I like the crunch." Whole room bursts out laughing, including Mrs. Snap. Story 38, he wore the same cowboy hat everywhere. I remember spotting him in the grocery store once, and he was still wearing the hat. I'd been in classes with him since 6th grade, but only when we were in high school and were working on a group project together did it occur to me to just ask him about the hat. I'm going to wear this hat everywhere. That way when I die or people move on from school or work with me, they're going to remember my hat or see a hat like it and think of me. And you know what? It worked. I remember you, Garrett. Story 39. So two of them, actually. I don't remember the context, but kid 1 was about 13. He did something to upset kid 2, who was about 7. And so kid 2 bit him in the shoulder, and her 2 front teeth stuck. She pulled back, and her 2 front teeth were stuck in his shoulder. She screamed. He screamed. And they both went to sick bay. They both went to the hospital. Both got suspended for a while. When they came back, she had no front teeth, obviously, and he had a bandage on his shoulder. He took the bandage off, and it was all infected. Nurse got wind of it and called him in. Apparently, he went to the hospital, but the mom couldn't afford care, so they both left without being discharged. So he get no medical attention. A human bite can be worse than an animal bite. This time, apparently, the nurse threatened to call child services if the kid didn't seek medical attention. He was out of school for weeks. Came back and was basically fine. Story 40, I brought my Furby to school as a joke, and he kept grabbing it during last period and throwing it around and saying he was going to smash it. Finally, I grabbed it from him and put it back in my backpack. Because I was freaked out, he then started to make really weird threats about how he was going to choke me out and stuff. I told him to stop, as he was making me nervous. So then he stared me dead in the eyes and told me he was going to bash my skull in with a hammer and watch the blood seep from my body. After that, he always acted extremely hostile towards me, and even brought a real hammer to school and threatened me with it in the hallway every morning. I had never talked to him prior or even after, but suffice to say, that kid got arrested for possession of child. You know what? In addition, he also got a charge for attempted murder for a battery case tied to his arrest. Story 41, my good friend Richard was a mad genius and super weird. He pretty much aced every high school class. We both joined the Army out of high school. He left for basic in June, and I didn't leave until August. We both went to FT Benning for basic and airborne school, and by chance ended up at FT Bragg, him in the 82nd and me at 7th SFG. He had taken up martial arts and would practice with his staff for hours outside of the barracks. He was told many times to cool it with the staff thing by the duty sergeant. Anyway, we took a road trip to DC for a long weekend, and a bum came up and kind of aggressively panhandled us kids. And Richard whipped out this tonfa out of his long jacket he always wore, stuck it in this guy's gut, knocking the wind out of him, and then spinning it around and clobbering this guy in the skull. It made a terrible sound. We took off running and did not get caught. Richard also liked heavy metal, and I made a comment one time that it sounded like screaming baboons. He liked that so much, he'd been a coat hanger, heated it up, and branded ASB onto his arm for screaming baboons. It all ended when he leapt off his barracks roof, 4 stories, screaming that he was an F-4 Phantom. He didn't die, but was hospitalized and then drummed out with a psych discharge. Turns out he is schizophrenic. Story 42, I was the weird kid. I was a loner, didn't belong to a clique, I had one friend who wasn't in cliques either. I was friendly with many, especially the teachers, but I stood out. I was and still am masculine and am female. That didn't help. One year I had this teacher that all the girls had crushes on. Young, handsome, charming, he had a lattice man reputation, which, looking back, might honestly be undeserved. My friend handed me a pair of weird-looking unders. They were a theater prop from a play she was in. During lunch, I taped them to his blackboard up front and added the note, "You left these at my house last night, Dave." His entire next class saw it before he got in. Boy, was he pissed and embarrassed. I immediately felt that he might blame the wrong person. So I confessed. He gave me a look, said nothing, and stormed off. Harry's a fun kicker. My mom is a bit weird herself. At parent-teacher conference, she told him she thought what I had done was hilarious. So, yeah, that's what this weird kid did. By the way, someone above mentioned that some weird kids are like that due to a bad home environment. I can tell you that was absolutely the case with me. An ex-stepfather used to beat the out of me. Only me, never my mom. or siblings, thank goodness, but you see how it's also up. I endured parentification at a very young age. Severe punishments for things you wouldn't really punish a kid for, verbal abuse and emotional abuse. Other family members who were supposed to love me, and who very much knew, didn't do what I needed them to. The ex-stepdad needed to be jailed, and my mom needed help so that I could stay with her and my siblings. Nope, didn't happen. No one rescued me, so I rescued myself. Ended up in a foster home in my school district, but they were pretty abusive, too. Just not physically, verbally, and emotionally. Lots of unfair rules and situations. I was stifled. I felt like a prisoner and a slave there. It was not a great childhood. School was my refuge. I loved reading and learning, and my teachers were awesome. But I was still the weird kid, without a clique. Well, I'm a late-in-life career changer. And in going into teaching, I should have done it years ago. It's time to be a teacher and give back. Story 43, dude showed up at the school around 2 a.m. in a suit. Somehow got inside the school, and was found by security at about 6 a.m., walking around the school hallways. Story 44, smoked in class and put a scissor in the socket in classroom, causing a blackout in half of the school building. Will never forget him. See him every time I look in a mirror. Story 45, broke a mercury thermometer in the science lab one day. He was removed from school the very next day, expelled. Then there was the weird girl who every time she passed by me, she said boobies. Story 46, there was a kid in my school known as the race car kid. I don't know his real name, but during lunch he would run around the quad pretending to be in a race car. He'd make the RRR engine sounds and everything. Story 47, we were walking as a class through the gym, unsupervised, and he swung himself up on the basketball backboard supports, climbed to the top, walked along the top edge, and did a flip onto a gym mat below. This was late elementary school. Story 48, we were in bio lab, dissecting fetal pigs. The weird kid comes over and asked me if I knew how to tie a small noose. I'd been a Boy Scout who knew several knots, so I tied a loose knot with a window blinds rope. The weird kid then put his fetal pig into the noose and launched it out the window. It fell a story below and banged against the window of the social studies class below us. We heard their screams and laughter, and we all cracked up laughing. He was caught and got detention for a day, but he went from weird kid to slightly cool weird kid for the rest of the year. Story 49, he hurled racial slurs at a black classmate and then stabbed him 17 times in the middle of third period. We were in middle school, and the teachers panicked. Didn't help. Another student ran to get counselors because we didn't have cell phones then. 2 counselors, another classmate, and myself separated them. My black classmate survived, and I don't know what he does for work now, but I know he lives with his mom, wife, and kids in a nice suburb near where we grew up. The racist classmate was expelled and put on house arrest, followed by juvie. I don't know where he ended up. I hope he learns from his actions, and if he doesn't, I hope he rots. Story 50 came to this thread paranoid that someone from my school posted about me. After reading some of these, I'm starting to think that our school didn't have the weird kid. Story 51, one kid cut his finger open and repeatedly wrote his name in blood over the desk. Another kid was caught jacking it under the desk in chemistry, and that one led to a very awkward assembly about appropriate classroom behavior. Story 52, she thought she was a cat and carried yarn and hissed and scratched anyone who messed with her. Then one day, she abruptly tackled another student and started kissing him on the lips. This was 2nd grade. Grew up to be an exotic dancer. Story 53, not me, but my dad's friend Dale was their weird kid. When they were in high school, my dad was hanging out in the parking lot waiting for my mom GF at the time before class. When Dale came peeling his Jeep, he gets out, says, "Hey, Eagle Face 5S Dad, look what I got," and pulls out a 12-gauge shotgun and shoots it 3 times. He shot out a window of the school. The principal leans out the shot-out window, screaming, "What the was that?" And my dad and Dale stand there dumb and say nothing. The gun was confiscated for the day. Dale was allowed to pick it up that afternoon, and they had to replace the window that Saturday as punishment. Edit for spelling and grammar in kindergarten. The weird kid removed the glass from a child-sized full-length mirror so that only the wooden frame remained, whereupon he tied a toy saw, blunt but made out of aluminum, to the top beam. At the base, he set a couple of curved blocks one atop the other so that the recessed areas faced each other and formed an O. Laying an empty cookie bowl in front of the contraption, he proclaimed to all and sundry that he had built a guillotine. My friends, I was that weird kid. My politics have drifted closer to the center, but otherwise I haven't changed much.